Hello and welcome to Off the Beaten Path. To get to where we are going this week, you once needed a horse of wood, legs of stone and a frame of iron. Till the late 60s, when its strategic importance was discovered and road and rail links established, it was more or less cut off from the rest of India. And yet, even today it's considered a remote outpost beyond the beat of the conventional tourist. If you pick up your courage and venture here, you'll enter a magical world you're unlikely to ever forget. It's a full moon night on the dunes. To the music of the sarangi, dancers in their colorful costumes put on a breathtaking display at the 3-day desert festival held each year in Jaisalmer. During those days, this ancient desert citadel is chock-a-block with tourists. It's possible to find a South Indian executive rubbing shoulders with an insurance salesman from Europe. They are all here to sample a little of the exotic that this part of Rajasthan is famous for. The irony is that it's only after the festival packs up that you can experience the real Rajasthan. Having traveled so far, you have to try a camel safari. It varies between half a day and 15 days depending on what exactly you want to do. Remember to bring along lots of sunblock lotion, lip balm, plenty of water and a hat. The first thing that strikes you about the landscape is that it's quite unlike what coffee table books would have us believe. Contrary to popular perception, much of this part of Rajasthan is full of scrub vegetation, wild grasses and occasional trees. The dunes you associate with the desert are few and far between. In fact, you have to travel as far as 45 kilometers from Jaisalmer to see some. But before you do that, you've got to take in the sights in the city. What better place to start than a Jaisalmer's Golden Fort, which seems to grow out of the rock on the 80-meter high three-cut hill. Built in 1156, it's a true citadel with a quarter of the city's population living within its walls as they've done for centuries. A walk in the fort's twisted gullies will bring you face to face with people with an old worldly charm, who seem to be living 20th century lives in a 12th century ambiance. Also packed within the fort are shops, hotels and temples, virtually an entire city. You can spend days here marveling at how the old and the new merge almost imperceptibly in a monument that's truly alive. "800 years ago, Jaisal, a Rajput prince who had usurped his nephew's throne, moved his capital here to consolidate his position by creating an impregnable fort. A hermit with prophetic powers whom Jaisal consulted warned him that the fort would be ransacked 2.5 times. Jaisal felt it was a risk worth taking, and Jaisalmer was born." The Bhartis who ruled here lived off plunder. Caravans on the spice route from Central Asia to Delhi had to pass through here for water and supplies. They were allowed to proceed only after they had been taxed heavily. Cattle stealing, hunting and falconry helped the clans pass their time. With the opening of the Bombay port in the 18th century, the spice route faded in importance and Jaisalmer lost its link with the outside world. The fortunes of this desert outpost dwindled, and it was the last principality to submit to the British. If you're wondering whether the prophecy that the fort would be ransacked 2.5 times ever came true, you'll just have to wait and see. 3 hours into the safari, I have to admit it hasn't been too comfortable. My legs and shoulders hurt and my back doesn't seem to belong to me anymore. Sitting sideways helps. I'm already wondering how Lawrence of Arabia fared so well on a camel. Luckily for me, just as the going became really tough, our guide Mool Shankar Vyas, recognized by his beard, called a stop for lunch at the Desert National Park. The sanctuary is home to a number of animal and bird species. All we managed to see were a couple of chinkaras and the great Indian bustard. Once almost extinct, it is now protected by law, which explains why its numbers are steadily growing. These large birds can be spotted easily. Though they can fly over short distances, they prefer walking around the park where they are safe from predators and poachers. The Sudasari National Park is just 45 kilometers from Jaisalmer. Spread over a large area, it's worth a visit if you have the time. Grass, trees, goats and lots of birds. You wouldn't think you were in the middle of the desert. And yet, just 7 kilometers from Jaisalmer, Amar Sagar was once a huge man-made lake. The water has long receded, but some of the old ambiance still remains. Though the water may have vanished from Amar Sagar, there's plenty of it in Gadisar, one of Jaisalmer's landmarks. First built in 1156, this tank was reconstructed in 1367 by Maharaja Gadsi Singh. It has been the only source of water for the people of Jaisalmer for centuries. Today it's a popular tourist spot. The entrance to Gadisar is said to have been built by Pilon, a wealthy prostitute, as a gift to the people of the town. This so infuriated the royal harem that orders were given to demolish it. The prostitute proved smarter. She built a temple to Lord Krishna on top of the gate. That's why you can still see it today. Food cooked in the wild by Mool Shankar not only looks good, it tastes divine. More so when you're ravenous. Our camels got tanked up too, but in their own casual sort of way. We were learning more about them as we went along. Apparently, they are not as docile as they look. They are very independent and can kick and bite viciously when they are annoyed. They tend to be unpredictable during the mating season, which just happens to be at the time we are doing this safari. Today, very little remains of the ancient capital of this region, Ludharva. It was attacked and captured twice in the 11th and 12th centuries by Muhammad Ghazni and Muhammad Ghori. It was the apparent vulnerability of this fortress town that prompted the building of Jaisalmer as an alternate capital. The ravages of time have taken a heavy toll on the buildings here. The absence of restoration work is the rule rather than the exception in many areas of tourist interest in and around Jaisalmer. This is depressing. But the fabulous Jain temple here makes the 16-kilometer drive from Jaisalmer worth it. The temple was damaged during the Ghaznavid and Ghorid invasions, but each time it was tended to with such care that it has survived a tumultuous past. Of course, if you look closely at the carvings, you can see that many have been defaced. This doesn't take away, however, from the splendor of the intricately worked walls and arches and the beautifully executed artificial tree, symbolizing Jain respect for the sanctity of all forms of life. It's not surprising that this temple still remains a pilgrimage center for the Jains as it's been for centuries. In fact, there are many Jain temples in Jaisalmer Fort and at Amar Sagar. Each of them is an architectural marvel, and if you have the time and inclination, they are all worth a visit. As old as the temple and perhaps older is the immortal tale of a beautiful princess Moomal, a handsome prince Mahendra, and the magical camel that made their clandestine midnight tryst possible. As the story goes, they fell in love here in Vidarbha. Every night, Mahendra visited her, traveling huge distances across the desert, until, for some reason, he was prevented from doing so. A heartbroken Moomal traveled to Amarkot to seek her beloved, only to die of fatigue and a broken heart at the gates of his fort. As I pondered over the sad tale of Moomal and her Prince Charming, I couldn't help but wonder how he travelled 150 kilometers each night from Sindh to meet his beloved when all he had at his disposal was a camel. But then, that's just what makes Rajasthan so fascinating. The quaint mixture of fact and fiction, myth and reality, together with the embellishments of time, leaves you spellbound. As you listen to the ballads, you realize that unless you're a historian desperately seeking the truth, it's best to treat folklore as an indication of what might have happened and leave the rest to reason. If you have a vivid imagination, you can travel 180 million years back in time when Rajasthan was covered by a huge ocean. Several cataclysmic upheavals later, the sea made way for thick forests which gradually dried out as water disappeared. Over time, what was left is the desert you now see. If you think this is fiction, a visit to the Akal Fossil Park 17 kilometers from Jaisalmer will change your mind. It's an eerie, desolate place and looks like a throwback to the Jurassic Age, which it is. Here you can actually see the remains of trees 180 million years old which have turned into fossils. Unbelievable, but true, say archaeologists. In fact, fossilized tree trunks have had to be protected with iron grids as unbelievers used to hack bits and pieces to build houses. Akal is a protected area now, and visitors are allowed only to see but not touch crumbling links with an age lost in the mists of time. If you're looking for a souvenir, stone fossils or harbour stones as they are called are readily available in local shops. You can actually see life forms of the sea embedded in them. Speaking of souvenirs and mementos, there's a whole range of handicrafts to choose from. Jaisalmer's gullies are where most visitors do their shopping. Remember to bargain because prices are set keeping foreigners in mind and the fact that the tourist season lasts only from October to March. As far as local travel is concerned, unmetered auto rickshaws and taxis are readily available. However, hired cycles are the easiest and cheapest way to get around town. If you're moving out of Jaisalmer, we'd advise you to take a jeep and negotiate your fare in advance. If you really want to lose yourself in the desert ambiance, however, there's nothing quite like a camel. My camel's called Mr. Moro. His ruminative disposition and benign gaze have disarmed me completely. I allowed him to set his own pace. After all, if he was going to be my companion on this trip, it was important that we got along.
Oh,
technological adversities they have to contend with, Rajasthanis are sturdy and cheerful. Bright turbans and clothes seem to offset the drudgery of the daily routine that involves long treks to get water. Struggling to survive in a harsh environment does take its toll though. The rural female literacy rate is painfully low, and perhaps this explains why child marriages still occur. This doesn't take away, however, from the cheerfulness of the rural folk and their belief in their destiny. You've got to try it if you ever come to Jaisalmer. A night on the dunes near Sam with only the stars and the wind for company. All you need are a couple of tents and warm clothes, for desert nights can be cold. The Raikas or camel breeders make good company once the camels are taken care of. If you're lucky, they'll sing for you and recount tales of times long past, like when the fort was ransacked and the dreaded Johar performed. Yes, the prophecy of the sage did come true. A raid on a Sultanate caravan provoked swift retribution. After a siege of 7 years, the ramparts were breached, and the opium-intoxicated Bhartis proclaimed Johar and rushed out to meet a heroic death. History was repeated after a raid on a Sultanate camp some years later, and the terrible rite of Johar, or the entering of women and children into ceremonial fires to escape dishonor, was performed again. If you're shocked and horrified at this barbaric practice of beaver, try to see it in the context of the brutality of warfare as it was practiced then. Remember, Johar was preparation for the menfolk to fight to their death so that the victor would have nothing to gloat over. The half-sack of the prophecy came true in the 16th century when a friendly Pathan chief used deceit to smuggle his soldiers into the fort. The Rajput king killed several princesses of his family to prevent them from being carried away before his guards overpowered the intruders. Closely linked to the rite of Johar is the awesome act of sati, which was thought to render a woman immortal by freeing her from rebirth. A visit to the Chhatris at Suli Dangri and Badabag will reveal just how widespread the practice was. The pillared and canopied Chhatris marked the place where the rulers and well-to-do noblemen were cremated. Many Chhatris have an inscribed tablet with an image of a royal personage on horseback and that of a woman. This means that the wife immolated herself on her husband's funeral pyre. If there are several images of women, it means that the lesser wives and concubines did likewise. The size of the Chhatri and the quality of its execution determines the status of the person to whom it was dedicated. Mornings in the desert are pleasant. As the day progresses, it gets hotter and hotter. That's why few tourists ever brave the summer heat. Between October and March, though, the days are quite agreeable. The Raikas seem to be at home all the time. Wouldn't you be surprised if 84 villages around your city were vacated in a matter of weeks? If you travel around Jaisalmer, you'll see a number of ghost towns like this one where the Paliwal Brahmins once lived. They had migrated here to escape the taxes levied on their pastoral and commercial pursuits in Marwar. Traders, bankers and cultivators, they were a wealthy community. But dacoities, the eclipse of the camel route and the tyranny of Salim Singh the prime minister of one of the Ravas, is said to have induced their mass migration. Today, empty streets and crumbling houses are what remains of a once thriving community. Salim Singh, the man who tyrannized the Paliwals, lived in this Haveli in Jaisalmer. A magnificent structure, it towers over the city. In fact, he had intended it to be the tallest building in Jaisalmer. Perhaps that's why the king had the top 2 floors destroyed. If you come here, you can meet Kamal Singh Mota, a 7th generation descendant of Salim Singh. Throughout Jaisalmer, you will be amazed at the sheer opulence of the Havelis and the quality of workmanship on yellow stone. The largest and most famous one, built by a family of brocade merchants, is Patwon Ki Haveli. It took 50 years to build in the 18th century. A short walk from here and you will be standing in front of another architectural wonder, the mansion of Diwan Nathmalji, another wealthy merchant. Once you've seen it, you've seen them all. The longer you stay in Jaisalmer, the more you'll discover there is to see. Pokhran, Tanot, Barmer. The list is endless. In fact, they say if you ever leave Jaisalmer without visiting the temple at Tanot, you're bound to return.
Badila thari rame